This is Create the Next from ProCFO Partners, where every week we explore strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help today's businesses put their financial picture in context.
Welcome back to Create the Next. I'm Chris Bentliff, and I'm happy to have John Mikas sitting down with us today. And John, we're talking about kind of getting back to basics a little bit. We're talking about the bread and butter, the nuts and bolts, specifically of accounts payable. So I'm really interested in, I love when we have these conversations where we kind of come back to the best practices. We kind of come back to the stuff that if you don't get right, everything else that we talk about, everything else that we do, all the sort of nuances get a lot more difficult. So let's welcome and I guess, where do we start? Like how, if you're kind of giving us guidance and advice here, what's our number one, like, look, when we're talking about accounts payable, here's the first thing we got to think about.
First and foremost, I think what we need to think about is, I was an auditor from, a junior perspective. So, think about that in terms of segregation of duties, what we call in the audit, limiting access, establishing internal controls. Really what it boils down to is, never have one person doing every single process, every single thing in the process. In a small company, sometimes you don't have that ability to segregate those duties. But, as the owner, CEO or whatever, of the company, especially a small company, you still have to have the oversight of saying, okay, yes, I trust this person, but I still might not necessarily need to verify, but, there's things that we need to do to make sure that everybody is, for lack of a better term, honest and doing their job correctly.
Is that the key? Is risk kind of the key sort of arbiter there? Is that the big thing? Like, just make sure you're protecting yourself. Are there other advantages to separating those duties?
There are other advantages to separating them, but I mean, risk is kind of, this is the accounts payable is one of the areas where we see the most, if you want to say, fraud go through. Stories after stories after stories over my years where I've heard, a two-person shop, the secretary, whatever, the executive assistant, a third person came in, she was bad-mouthing this person, and 2 years later, after the person left, you found out, yeah, she was, embezzling millions of dollars, right? So there are these stories out there, that to me, this is kind of one of the biggest risks, but there are other things, so if you have the process, if you want to say separated, you can then, if somebody leaves, the company, you're not stuck in a lurch like, oh, shoot, Jane was the only one that did that process. Now we need to, ramp somebody up, figure out how to do it. Hopefully, these people give you a 2 weeks notice. Sometimes they don't. So there's other reasons for this segregation of duties, for this, separating the process. Other things, in that nature might be, like I said, just that backup, that ability to things. But I think also what we can think of is, what you can do is just document the process. Have that person sit down and document it well in a documentation, so if they happen to leave, if they happen to go out sick, if they happen to, we used to say in the audit world, God forbid somebody gets hit by a bus. One of my auditors used to say, God willing, they win the, they win the lottery, right? Are they going to come in the next day? Maybe, but, so it's a matter of, having this process documented and for these purposes, so somebody else can come in and jump in, if needed.
You make a really good point, which is true elsewhere in an organization, but so often we say, oh, I don't know, Joe knew all of that. Nobody knows that was this person's world. And then you have to start digging through their particular way of doing things or their, sort of eccentricities and how they manage this, or maybe they've got some weird spreadsheet where they do this, but then they move it over to here for this. And I love your idea of sort of, SOP, standard operating procedures around how does this work, make it predictable, make it repeatable so that anybody can step into that role and immediately have an impact. So in addition to risk, it's really, I think there's a huge function of efficiency, right? So And even if you need to make a new hire to like double the workload or complement or assist, you've got some kind of base of knowledge there that isn't just hopefully this person who's been doing it forever and is insulated in their own little world, has been doing it the right way and can teach others how to do it.
Yeah, and as I said, we kind of, as like I said, my background being an auditor when I started out was risk mitigation, right? And so, if they go out sick, if they happen to, I don't know, right, past 2 years catch COVID and then they're in the hospital for a week. These types of things are there, right? And as you said, in any role, but when it comes to accounts payable, like I said, the first thing we see is, it's an area where it's prone to fraud and it's one of the easier places for fraud to happen. But also, like you said, risk mitigation in terms of, hey, if this person's out and we can't pay our vendors for 2 weeks, how our vendors kind of feel that, right? Oh, sorry, we can't pay because our one person who in the process is, isn't available. So in terms of that risk mitigation as well, it's, keeping, your vendors happy, especially in this world, this time of the world where, supply chains are short. And, I've heard owners of companies say, yeah, I couldn't get what I wanted. I had to, prepay. I had to do these kinds of things in order to get the, goods and services that I needed to help, my business stay afloat. So I mean, there's these different things that where you have to keep your vendors happy as well.
And I think that touches on some aspects of processing and some aspects of the human element. Is negotiation always a function of Joe on the other end of the phone, or are there processes, as you pointed out, that are in place for this? Are there ways that we can speed up, that we can make more predictable those processes? Do you have some guidance in those ways? Should we be automating more? Should we be integrating with other software that we have, or other other processes that we have? Or how can we, think smarter about that stuff?
Automation is key in every world. It speeds up the processing time. It cuts down on data entry time. It also cuts down on the human error factor. If somebody's typing in a number, numbers, my fat fingers often all the times hit the wrong number, hit the wrong key. So it helps in that respect. Yes, it speeds up this processing of the invoices. It speeds up the processing of the data entry. It can even help speed up the processing time of approvals, depending on the size of your organization. As you're small, right? One person's usually approving it. You as the owner, as you grow, you delegate that authority, who can approve how much, what departments, your different department heads. But you can also then, look at it as, okay, it's not a piece of paper being sent around in inter-office memos, and then it sits on somebody's desk and he puts another piece of paper on it and forgets about it. And that's where we see, this kind of electronic digitization, automation, really becoming key, because then you're right, the process, there is a process that can be followed and can be tracked, versus, like I said, a piece of paper that's sent around for somebody to sign and it's sitting on, Joe's desk for 3 weeks and somebody else forgot about it because, if you're, like you said, if you're overloaded, you might have hundreds of these invoices coming through. But yeah, so it's automation, it's digitization, centralization of these functions. So, let's say I'm the owner of the company and I want to know, hey, what is this, $20,000 invoice? I can go back, call up, email, whatever my AP, but, let's say it's 10 o'clock at night and I'm just having can't sleep. And, oh, what is this? If I can go into a central database and quickly look at it, then, it's taking 20 to 30 seconds of my time versus 20 to 30 seconds of an email, a minute, 2 minutes of a person's time of, searching it out, finding it, sending it, and, back to an email. So it's all encompassing. for this purpose of, okay, if we can automate things, digitize things, make things electronic, the process can go quicker, both on, on the front end and even on that back end of reviewing it.
I love what you're sharing around this idea of there's almost a magnitude of X, so you said a few seconds here and a few seconds, we got 20 seconds of an email. Well, multiply that times however many you might be concerning yourself with, and you can spend half a day doing work that isn't helping your business, innovate or advance. It's just trying to figure out when you're going to get paid or figure out when you're going to be paying your vendors, the things that are involved in accounts receivable, especially when there's a competitive climate where we want to make sure that we're on point with that stuff, where we want to make sure that we are cultivating the healthy kind of relationships with everybody involved in our own sort of supply chains. I think that there's a mechanical aspect to this that's a real focus, like, push this button, automate this, but there's a human aspect to it too, right? When everybody's sort of happy and feels like it's a predictable sort of payment system, nobody gets that kind of bad energy that says, well, look, man, this is my third phone call. What's going on with this invoice or whatever? How do you see that? I don't know. How does that contribute to this dynamic from your perspective?
I agree 100%. I mean, kind of going back to a little bit of what I was saying, during the pandemic and kind of post-pandemic, there's supply chain issues, right? And as I said, one customer of mine, that I was consulting with said, I had to prepay, it was $100,000 for this in order to, get up in the, in that list, right? So there is this thing of, like I said, this customer's paying on time. They're always, paying, in full. They're not. So yes, there is that human issue of like, okay, I'm not chasing down, if things break down on the accounts receivable at your vendors, they sometimes call the sales manager, right? The person, the rep in charge of you, right? So, right, then you involve the sales rep who's then calling, right, the late payer. And then the sales rep's like, okay, this is now, I'm going to put this person from a second tier to a third tier, because even if I sell them, my commission might get clawed back because we never got paid on it. So there's always things like that can happen. But I think also when you kind of do this automation, digitization, if you set up electronic payments and you have a set schedule, the 15th, like the 1st and the 15th of the month, that's when we're going to pay. Then you can always, all right, yep, sorry, or not sorry, but, if somebody calls you, hey, it's set for the 1st of the month or 15th of the month. That's when we pay. And, so what really helps in both aspects of, as you said, running your company, if you can pay an invoice that's, due, let's say between the 16th and the 20th, and say you paid on the 15th, right? They're going to be happy, but you're also keeping your money in your bank account almost as late as you can. There's always a process of saying, okay, we can pay daily. Is that beneficial for you if you need to keep your money in your bank account longer? Maybe it is, but how much time is it for the accounts payable people to do that? If you want to have a good, like I said, going back to the segregation of duties, somebody needs to make sure that everything we're paying is proper and correct and there's no fraud in it. So there's always that give and take of, okay, how often do we pay and how much time is it taking for us to run this process if we're paying, once a week, every 2 weeks, twice a month, so this time frame. But it helps, like I said, you can set that up to say, all right, well, we want to keep the cash until the day before we need to pay, or we want to have a consistency where we're paying on these dates, and then that just, as I said, it gives kind of this knowledge to your vendors that, hey, it's the 1st and 15th, is when we do check runs or payment runs, as we call them now, because checks are hopefully a thing of the past.
Right.
Because of like I said, just going through this whole process of digitization, electronic, automation, We can send out ACH. There's a lot of companies that even take credit cards nowadays. So if you are concerned a bit about your cash cycle, not that it's a good thing to put everything on a credit card, but if you pay that credit card off in full, some companies, even give you a 1%, cash back. So you can turn your accounts payable process into even a little bit of a cash generating department by utilizing, some of these other aspects that are out there.
Some of the things that you're talking about here, like how long to wait, how long to keep your money in the bank, different payment methods that could benefit the organization in different ways. I feel like those are kind of strategic. And I think there's a lot of aspects to accounts receivable and payable that are very, we've got a bookkeeper, they might be involved, or we've talked about Joe in the side office, or we've got a controller. As we think about kind of that strategic perspective, what do you think is the CFO's role in energizing this, in realizing the dynamics, in making decisions, in having kind of that strategic perspective on this function instead of just the tactical or the mechanical? What should I be looking for my CFO to do? What kind of guidance or advice should I be looking for?
I mean, first and foremost, what they kind of call the cash conversion cycle. So how quickly do we get paid, right, for our goods and services versus how quickly we pay our vendors? Going back, Dell was a perfect example. What is it now, 30 years ago, maybe more, right? Dell would get paid for their products even before they shipped them out. Mm-hmm. Versus the process of, shipping something to a large retailer. It sits, 30 days, 60 days before they would get paid. So it's really strategically kind of looking at that cash conversion cycle. How quickly can we get paid, and how quickly do we need to pay our vendors? So if we can sit on, let's say, $100 million of cash for 30 days, is that better than us trying to finance that 100 million because we need to pay our vendors within 30 days and we're not getting paid for our services for 60 days after that. So that's kind of the strategic side of looking at both kind of the accounts receivable and accounts payable, in this cash conversion cycle. But kind of first looking at it in terms of the accounts payable, I was looking at more of, okay, right, the strategic side of this, okay, how can we eliminate fraud? How can we eliminate, any issues that happen? But also, as you think about it, true, that there is this strategic side of, hey, if we can keep our cash longer, isn't that better for us?
John,
so we don't, right?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I kind of already said it. So we don't have to finance it, right? So we don't have to go to the banks. And even, today, these past, 6 months, banks have been getting stricter with their loans. And as we know, the interest rate's been going up. So the cost of the loan is going up.
Absolutely. John Mikas, ProCFO Partners, kind of taking us back to basics a little bit, but really good stuff. I think some of our listeners will fall into one of several buckets. I'm just kind of a mom and pop. I've got one or two people next to me. I've learned some things today. I'm a large organization and I don't necessarily know the nuts and bolts, but maybe I should inform myself. Or I'm in that large organization and I'm realizing that there's places where I can make some maybe subtle, but maybe larger investments or improvements that can smooth this process out, reduce those gaps that can create vulnerability and risk and inefficiency. John, thank you so much for your expertise and your guidance today. I think it's been a really valuable sort of back to basics conversation that's really essential for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching, and a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one today. Visit ProCFOPartners.com for more strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help you put your business's financial picture in context.